it's interesting to listen to the wonderful woman before me, because then I sit here and I'm taking notes, because I think, how does all this settle into the kids that sit in front of me every day? And this morning, I believe strongly in checking in with them, talking with them. I have the most incredible group of students, and so I said to them, oh, I'm a little bit nervous. I have this thing tonight. And so my kids were like, tell a story. We love you listening to your stories. Tell a story. And one mumbled under his breath, because it doesn't make us do work quite as quickly, but so seeing as we're not doing work, that's okay. But I thought I'd start tonight by sharing a story. So early on in my career, I had just finished up, and I'll take you sort of backwards from here, but I had just finished working with the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario with the Reflections of Me curriculum, and which felt like a roller coaster, going through all the emotional, personal reflections and new learning, etc. So I was a teacher librarian at another school, and I was mentoring two teachers, teaching grade 3, 4, and I was sharing some of the curriculum, etc., and talking about my journey, and they said, can we partner with you? My role as a teacher librarian was partnering in team teaching. I said, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. So we sat down, we decided, and our first lesson is actually a lesson that was written for the grade 3 curriculum. And what it is there's a mirror in a box. And you ask the kids, I have the most beautiful thing in the world in this box. What do you think it is? You don't show them the box, anything. So they scribble down and they write, or if they want to draw it out, being inclusive. And then slowly I asked them, I said, I'm going to come around and show you, but I don't want you to yell out. I don't want that student that's going, oh my God, right, and ruins it for everybody else. You know, like the movie ends this way, and you're like, oh, I was going to watch that, right? So as I'm going around, the kids, like, it's a shock. It's 8, 9-year-olds, and they're like, oh my gosh. And I'm watching, it's the first time I'm doing this, and I'm watching their faces, and some of them are looking away. And so we talk about it. What did you notice? And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm beautiful. Yeah, you're beautiful. We start to talk about it. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, constantly as teachers, first of all, we're thinking about a million things all at once and answering a million questions all at once too. And in my head I'm thinking, okay, when we sit down at lunch to dissect this with the teacher, like, this was great. So as the students are going to get ready for lunch, I turn, and there's a student, a grade 3 girl, and I might cry, who's sitting there crying, like sobbing. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, something happened. So I go over to her, and I said, Najla, what's going on, sweetheart? What happened? Like, who bothered you? Like, I'm ready to take the charge. What happened, right? And she said, I never thought I was beautiful, Miss V. I never looked at myself like that, Miss V. And you just told me that I'm beautiful. I'm one of the most beautiful things in the world. And so I share that story with you because it's that innocence, it's that reality that a grade 3 student can sit in front of us and think, they're ugly, they're not worthy, they're not beautiful, etc. That led to a lot of reflection on staff. We were a small staff at that school, and in sharing that story and then bawling my own eyes, in the staff room at lunchtime, as I shared with the classroom teacher, we then really started a dialogue amongst the staff to say, what are we going to do? Because a lot of the reaction was, oh my gosh, she's in grade 3. Why, she would think that maybe a grade 7 student would think that, but a grade 3 student, how would that happen? So we really had to step back and take a look at our structure. How does body image permeate into how does it sort of eat its way in, and how then do we respond to that? So a lot of questions started to come up. We started talking about, and I started asking questions, what is the language we use? I know my colleagues, I overheard them telling their students, I'm on a diet, I need to lose 20 pounds. If you see me eating anything, you yell at me. Well, what does that mean? Or presently, with a member of my current staff, I'm in a little conundrum, let's say, because he's walking around yelling at kids for eating unhealthy. But what does that mean? What is the language we use, and how, if students are so observant and students will mimic and students will take all sponges and take all that in, how does our language that we use by yelling at kids to say that that's unhealthy affect who they are, as they are, how they look, etc.? Using T-charts to cut out foods, to say yes, no, yes foods, and no foods. I'm sorry, but I love chocolate cake, so don't tell me it's a no food, right? And me wanting to eat it, and what the perception is, me at my size eating it, as opposed to someone else as a different size eating it. And so talking and being very open, I believe wholeheartedly in sharing our vulnerabilities with our students, being open, being honest, engaging in the discussions, and it's difficult sometimes. It's really difficult, and you might not have the answers, but that open, honest dialogue is so key, so that there's a safety, there's a community that's set, so that just as with parents, we want that open dialogue. I believe strongly that that needs to happen at the school level too, as an arm's length sort of a family that we set. Other questions. What kind of role models are we? Right? So if we're walking around saying, oh, that's unhealthy, I'm not eating that. So what role models are we? I remember walking down the hallway at one of my schools, and I was walking down the primary hallway, so the grade 1s and 2s, and they were getting ready for recess, and one student looked at Miss V, oh my gosh, you're so fat. And it was in that moment, as I deteriorated, I have to be honest, I thought, how am I going to respond? Am I going to say, wow, you're not supposed to talk to me like that? Making that, the connotation of that word, negative? Or am I going to respond differently? So I looked, sweetest little thing in the whole world. She's right, right? She wasn't looking. I looked down at her and I said, you are so right. Look, I'm big, you're small, you're beautiful, so am I. And she looked, she's like, you're right, are you on your duty? Can we play? Like, it was just sort of right? Like, can we be friends, right? And so it was in that response, it was how are we going to almost reclaim that word? How are we going to respond? It was not done to harm me. Although my own issues, I mean, I have very positive body image now, but it took me back to a place where it was like, not this again, with a 6-year-old, oh my gosh, right? I have to deal with it with all these other people, and now this. But that leads me to knowing your own bias. So talking with ourselves, that was a huge thing we had to talk about, we had to dissect. What is our bias? Right? Do we run to the gym obsessively? Then do we pass that on to our students? Right? And all these questions then led us to say, so then how do we include and engage in body image work, right? As an equity issue within the confines of a curriculum that we have to teach. So a lot of thought went into it, and we were quite lucky because ETFO's Body Image Project, Reflections of Me, had come out, and this is actually just one of the sort of symbols or representations of what that work was all about. Talking about mental health, talking about this positive self-esteem, right? It wasn't about size, right? All the different, it was so multi-layered and multifaceted. And so as that curriculum came out through ETFO, we were then, because of my connection to it, the woman who sort of spearheaded all the work asked me, would you like your school to be a pilot school? So we then, I went to a staff meeting. I think I manipulated a little bit, but because I'm so passionate about it, I started to cry. And they were like, okay, we'll do it. You pressured us, right? So I know how to do things, right? And but I felt so strongly. I thought this little girl here who was crying because she never realized she was beautiful almost became something that sort of pushed us into the work that we needed to do. So luckily we were, a lot of support was offered through ETFO, and everyone in the school was trained. It wasn't even a training, it was more of a, let's talk about our biases, let's be open and honest. How do you feel? And to this day, even sending out this event, the flyer to my colleagues at school, and we're in the middle of report cards, so none of them will be here tonight, but that's okay. But it sent a flurry, it opened up a door to talk. And for one staff member to say, oh my gosh, my niece is in university, and she wrote this essay about how angry she is with Forever 21, because she walked in there and there was nothing there for her. And she said, she's not that big, what is this? And she turned and started to write. So I believe strongly it needs to be something school-wide. It needs to be something that we work together. It needs to be something that we need to start with us. Because if it's if it really affects all of us in the school, it's affecting us everywhere, institutionally, societally, etc. So just listening, how do we help change our attitudes? How do we help students celebrate their natural sizes? Right? How do we engage in that talk and that work while still being mindful of a curriculum that we need to teach? And I believe strongly in manipulation of curriculum to make it work. So if you need hints, I can talk to you later. But we're looking at the language curriculum, looking at the arts curriculum, etc., and how those are open to be able to work through, and I believe strongly in working through enduring understanding, or a big idea, or an issue or a topic, and letting the learning flow from there. So students are writing for a purpose, not because I told them to, but because they want to, right? So that's transformative for me, education, that it comes from the students. And we've already started talk in my classroom, right? Because I talk openly about who I am, as I am. So how does that help? And I believe, truthfully, I believe in spreading the passion, right? We have lots of people that are passionate about lots of things. This is what I'm passionate about. So talking about it, spreading the passion with students, with staff. Later on, we still have to talk about it, but later on in this year, later on in this month even, as a 7-8 division, we will be engaging in a whole unit around body image work and looking at that and talking about, there's a great book called The Best Part of Me. So our French teacher who teaches our 7-8, she took that book and they're writing in French what the best part of them is, right? And so doing whole school work and looking how it can fit is a huge part. And a huge connection is media. And I think, like my colleagues up here that have spoken already, it's not looking at media just to blame media. It's looking at it to be critical viewers and to think about the messages and I think with any issue, to really question. And so those are, for me, huge life skills that whether or not I perfectly teach expectation 2.5, whatever that may be, it becomes null and void because what I'm teaching is is the heart and soul in addition to the mind. And I wish I had written them. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King Jr. is talking about a full education, including that piece. That it's not just about academics and educating the mind, but the heart and soul as well. And I believe that that's what this work does. I think I'm going to end there. Thank you for listening.